Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.
There you go, the ball is in, the game is on. Welcome on in to Over the Line Extra on a Friday this week, as distinct from our usual Thursday slot, because we needed to get an extra 24 hours from the CCCCCCCC. And at the end of it all, Sean, we are none the wiser other than what we're supposedly hearing as regards suspensions. So what a week we've had in football since our interview with Aaron Kernan last week. He did say it was going to be tight. It was. Couldn't have been tighter. But I don't think any of us foresaw the madness that went on at the end of normal time. What's your take on it all? Of course, you don't get things like that in hurling.
No, we don't. No, we don't get involved in that type of stuff. First of all, it totally overshadowed what was a great game. Very enjoyable game, I have to say. I was really intrigued during the week when you got Micheal Merton.
What was
the
that
Minister
about?
for Sport. Everyone commenting, I mean, where are you going? I thought from day one, obviously, there's a few incidents within it that were obviously going to be picked out, and I would imagine that the eye gouging incident will be the main one. But if you sit down in the cold light today, there isn't an awful lot more. I mean, I think everyone would expect that Sean Kelly and Eugene's suspensions will be quashed. There might be a Galway player maybe in trouble for maybe aiming, would say, some retaliation at the eye gouge or whatever. But other than that, despite all the furore and all the hullabaloo, is there a lot of stuff in
there
it?
isn't. I mean, if you take the gouging out of it, there's nothing.
No.
I mean, it's...
No, look, at some say I get the point that you don't need that and you have kids looking in and all that, but I think the reaction was a bit over the top. It'd be different if this morning we were coming out with a list of 9-10 players suspended for doing this, doing that. But I think that they'll do well to, other than the gouging incident and the reaction to it.
Well, it was a rip-roaring contest.
It was,
and to be honest,
yeah.
It's been a pathetic football championship.
It has.
This is exactly what they wanted, a shot in the arm. Maybe they didn't want 3 extra shots in the arm,
No.
A triple dose. But nonetheless, it's got everybody talking about football for a change.
And in fairness to the two teams, I mean, even from the neutral viewpoint, to get 2 goals at the end of the game for Armagh to draw the game initially, then to get goals are the lifeblood of all games. And for so long we had seen, the blanket defence. But I mean, the two teams went at it. I was intrigued as well, and no more than Aaron Kernan on with us last week. Every pundit did call that this game could go to penalties, and
including Colm Keys, who said it on this podcast.
And it did go that way. But again, what is now opened up is another Galway Ulster clash with Derry. I'm intrigued again to see that Derry are now being put in as favourites. I think the Sunday game last Sunday night, each one of the pundits went for Derry. I don't know where Derry are coming from here. Obviously they've got themselves organised or whatever, but it's not that long ago that Joe Brolly was writing snippets about where the county board even going to put in a team 3 or 4 years ago in the championship. Such was the game, and was at such a low ebb. They made fantastic progress, but as we said last week, Ollie, Galway have a path to die for here. And, I would hope that the suspension for Ori is put to bed early. I think Clare might have suffered a bit of a hangover from that going into the Wexford game in the quarterfinal of the hurling last week. So I think, look at Galway are in a good place, and they can also look now at the Dublin Kerry game as well, in the background. Get your own job done, obviously, is the focus, but it has livened up the football championship. But I think going back to the reaction to the four, and listen, we don't want to see it, and I'm not condoning it in any shape or form, but it was a lot of handbags.
A good brawl, though, in Dublin Kerry, and plenty of eye gouging, and about 12 suspensions for a final against God. That would be the perfect scenario. However, let's get back to hurling, Sean, because we're here this week very much to look at Galway and Limerick. And I mean, in a moment, we're going to talk to a man who knows all about winning matches without scoring goals.
You never lived that one down.
For this Galway team, I mean, they came mighty close when losing 27-24 last time round in a classic All-Ireland semi-final. But Galway are not getting any sort of a break from any pundit. No. They're just being written off left, right and centre.
If you and I were over Galway, and the next lads we'll talk about would know about being over teams, if you were actually writing the script of how you wanted to go into an All-Ireland semi-final, I think this would be it. Galway were given, first of all, Galway got quite a lambasting for not beating Kilkenny in the Leinster final. were probably the conversion of a goal or two away in the first half from probably winning that game. Then they got no credit whatsoever for beating Cork, who had found themselves back in the championship through a bit of luck, had won 3 games in a row. Galway beat them, albeit by the 1 point, got no credit for that. And now they've arrived against, the best team in the country, who are heading for 3 in a row of All-Ireland titles, and no one has given them a chance. But I think if you were in the Galway dressing room right now, I think what you're looking at is a perfect scenario. You put the head down, you get into the bubble, and you say, look, let's give this a shot.
Loads of people watching in online. Sean, you can introduce our next guest in a moment. We've got Ronan and Adrian who are watching in at the moment. Hugh has been on. Hello to you, Hugh. I'd imagine it's the middle of the night there, or very early morning, should I say.
Where's that, Lochray, is it?
Fort Lauderdale in Florida.
Sounds a bit further than Lochray.
Tell you one thing, Hugh, if I turned around the camera and you were looking out the window here in Sandy Road where we are, it's far from Fort Lauderdale.
1st of July and the rain bucketing down.
Shane, Lenane, Cahill, all the lads are in as well, as is Linda, waiting to hear from our next guest. Who have we got, Sean?
The man we've got first off is the former Galway hurling manager and the man, of course, that led Galway to the All-Ireland title in 2017. Micheal Donoghue, you're welcome.
Hi, lads.
Micheal, is this the perfect way to go into an All-Ireland semi-final for Galway?
Yeah, it's unbelievable listening to you there, and you're so correct, that it seems to be a foregone conclusion and everyone is going for Limerick. And look, you have to say they are the form team in the championship. Their performances to date have been really, really good. They've timed their run to perfection. If you consider what their form was like during the league, they've won some great games without probably their main talisman in Keane Lynch. So rightly so, they're going in as favourites. But when you come to play Limerick and you're saying what are the biggest components you need to maybe stop them or challenge them, the first thing you always allude to is the physicality and strength. And the 2 teams probably left in the championship are Galway and Clare that can do that. And Galway have shown down through the recent years that if you bring that physicality and you can match them in that regard, you have a chance. And go back to 17, go back to 20, there's only a few points in it. We'd lost Joe and Cahill Mannion in that game, and the 2 league games, both home and away, in recent years we've won them. So I go back to the 2020 game, and it was probably similar enough that everyone was putting a huge expectancy on Limerick. And ultimately, look, there's only one time to lead a game, or you have to lead a game, and that's at the final whistle, and they've done that in the championships. But Galway have given them huge scares. And you're right, Sean, in terms of this week you're going, there's absolutely no pressure on the lads. We spoke about the last time I was on about, this team and squad are really in a transition. And, when you're looking at the team that got knocked out by Waterford last year, there's 5 or 6 players missing. There's, I think, 12 new lads in the squad, which equates to about 35%. So there's been a huge turnover. And going into Sunday, you have a free shot as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure right throughout the week it's about the lads would just be hammering home to make sure that they bring that intensity, they bring that work rate. And Galway have series hurlers, and if you bring the work rate and attitude, your hurling will follow suit from that. And I was with you the night down in Limerick when they played in the league, and it was they brought and surpassed Limerick's intensity that night. And that's what I think all Galway supporters will be looking for on Sunday.
Of course, one of the big talking points, and you talk about the new players that have come in. But if that is the case, Micheal, you certainly need all your old dogs, and one of those is Garage McInerney. And we're still of the belief that he's touch and go whether he will play or not. I mean, how big a loss would he be if we were to presume that he's not going to play?
It'd be a huge loss because he probably doesn't get the credit he deserves, Ollie. He's the fulcrum of defence there at centre back. He's so dominant in the air. He's a tormentor, I'd say, for an attacker to be on. He's just so physically strong, and he always moves forward and lays off the ball, and he starts so many attacks. But if he doesn't start on Sunday, it's the probability of moving Joseph Cooney back into the half back line, which he's well accustomed to. But in terms of what you need and maybe some of the matchups you'd be looking toward on Sunday, it's really important that hopefully we have Garage there, and I'm sure the lads will give him every chance anyway. So hopefully we'll see him running out of the Hogan stand on Sunday.
I mean, one of the things we're intrigued, and we've seen Galway's puck out strategy, and this is going to be huge, isn't it, on Sunday? Because what do you do against Limerick? Do the two wing backs push up on Tom Morrissey and Garage Hegarty for puck outs? If you then lose it in a break, or you're leaving yourself open? We've seen that Conor Cooney, I think, is the second most hit target in the championship from a Galway viewpoint, so he's obviously your main puck out target. What do you do? Do you mix it, Micheal? Do you go short for a period? Limerick are very good at setting traps for going short, where they'll put pressure on you to try and overturn you there. What's the strategy? Is it a mix of everything that you need to look at on Sunday?
It is, and I think when you're looking at Limerick, it's such an important aspect of their game, and the reality, lads, is that hurling is gone to a game of possession. So therefore, when you have your puck out, it's paramount that you win possession from it, be it going long or mid or short. And if you look at Limerick for a second, Barry Nash is probably their biggest target for short puck outs. He's really good at that stage, coming forward and hitting the middle third, hitting that half forward line. But you have to give huge respect to Limerick, to John and Paul Kinnerk in terms of the way the lads are coached. Because if you go to the Munster final, Clare pushed up very early on, and it was very obvious that they were going to squeeze them on it and put them under pressure. And I'm sure Galway will do the same. But the thing is, when you're defending the puck out, you've got to be so tuned in to know where your man is, but you've nearly got to give him a few yards that you can entice Nicky Quaid to do it, but equally that you're not discarding your own setup or what you want to do on it. And if you go back to that Munster final, Clare pushed up right, and then the start of the second half, Limerick had recognised that, and then they started bringing 5 towards their own full back line, and Clare still followed them. And as a result of that, then you get the space behind, and they're very good clearing out space. But I was at the game, the Limerick Clare game in Innis, and I think in the first half, Clare's puck outs were at 44% or something like that, right? And we were talking about it at half time. And in the second half, and I think it's a real feature of Clare, right, that they've improved, or how quick and the speed Eibhear Quilligan has taken the puck outs. And I think even in the second half that day, he started pucking the ball at a rate of knots. Do you know what I mean? It was, I'd say, 3-4 seconds when it was gone wide or over the bar or score or whatever. So the restarts, they got the restarts going really, really quickly, and it kept them in the game. And I think the stats by the end of the game were gone up to 80%. The reason I'm saying that is, in fairness to Aina, when you look at it the last day, even it was probably his best performance in the Galway jersey to date. But in the second half, he done similar. He sped it up. Yeah. He was going mid to long, and I think the ideal one is somewhere around the half back line, that the next ball in can be a killer ball. But I thought he did that really well, and he'll have to be really on his game the next day. But equally, when you're talking about this, you put the pressure maybe on the keepers, but it's when we're in possession of it, everyone has to be available and everyone has to be switched on to take it. You know what I mean? And it was brilliant the last day. The Joseph Cooney's score from distance was a perfect example of that. That if you have someone looking for it, you give it and it's executed to perfection like it was, and you have somebody like Joe who's caliber scoring from distance. So it's going to be a balance, Sean. It's going to be a balance, but it's going to be a huge part and element of the game the next day, the puck out strategies.
I'm always intrigued as well, Micheal, from a management point of view, how formulaic Gaelic games has become. And Galway had done enough tactically to wrestle the advantage against Armagh until they just decided a couple of old-fashioned bombs in around the house got them 7 points in injury time at the end of a match where they were struggling for the most part. What I'm getting at is, if you're a complete underdog, how can you engineer chaos like Armagh did in the closing minutes of a game like that from the get-go against Limerick, and just throw everything out of kilter as regards game plans? Or are they covered for just about every angle that's thrown at them?
Look, I was saying it earlier, Ollie. I think they're so well equipped and they can adapt. And we've seen even when the water breaks were in situ that how good they were to respond. With the whiteboard and so on. So look, they're a top team, and you have to give them huge credit and respect. But at the end of the day, we can talk about tactics and different things, but the forefront to all your preparation is to make sure that the lads are ready to go and that you come with an intensity and a work rate. And the caliber of player that's with the four teams, that if you bring that intensity, your hurling will always follow suit. So I think that's going to be the key thing for Galway, that they do bring the intensity and the work rate. And like what you're suggesting, if they do and bring that, that's where hopefully the boys can put pressure on Limerick. And as I said, we've seen the evidence in the league games over the last couple of years, and go back to 20, like Pádraig that day played really in front of Aaron Gillan for pretty much the whole game. And so look, there's going to be some fascinating things, like Barry Nash, I alluded to there in terms of the puck outs and his importance to Limerick on that. But like, if Cahill drops out, is he going to follow him, or how are they going to pick him up on that? Do you know what I mean? So there's some intriguing things that are going to unfold really here in the game, and that's why it's so exciting and can't wait for it.
It hasn't bothered them for the last couple of years, Sean, but I have to ask you, because this is something again that struck me in the football, because Galway won the Connacht Championship and had to wait so long before they got on the field against Armagh. It's a month now next Sunday since Limerick beat Clare. Now, as I say, it hasn't bothered them the last 2 years, but like, will we know after 10 minutes whether Galway have a chance in this game or not? Because at that point, surely any bit of rustiness will have worn off Limerick.
You probably will. I would imagine that Galway will want to start. They'll want to start early. They'll want to get into the game. As Micheal alluded to there, go back to 2 years ago, on 74 minutes in Croke Park, there was 2 points between Galway and Limerick. There was a free given to Limerick under the Hogan stand, which could easily have been a Galway free out. It was a free in. It was a game-changing moment. Now, that was a team that had lost Joe Canning, but had lost Cahill Mannion very early in the game, right? So I think Galway's game plan will be to stay in the game for as long as they can. I thought myself in the football, I thought Kerry looked a little bit rusty with that month-long absence last weekend. Galway didn't seem to, but maybe it's also a relation of what Kerry had played in the Munster Football Championship. But I think on that, Micheal, as well, that other point is Conor Whelan is in all-star form, in my humble opinion, right? Now, I think getting the ball into Conor Whelan, there's a stat floating since the Cork game that Galway got the ball in past the Limerick 45 on something like 43 occasions. On 31 of those balls in, Cork won them, right? Yet Whelan hit 1-2, had an assist, won a free, whatever. How do Galway go about improving that, Micheal, to get ball in the... Now, obviously, I know with the setup, at times Whelan is in a part of a 2, at times he looks as if he's part of a 1. But will that be something that Henry and the management team would have been looking at big time in the last 2 weeks now?
Yeah, it is, but I think it's something, Sean, we've spoken about throughout the season, like, that, look, all the teams at the minute are playing with 2 up top with varied movements or elements of movement on it. And, I think if you go back to 20, when you reflect back on it, and we were so close in that game, but if you remember coming into that game, Conor Whelan and Brian Concannon were absolutely burning it up in the championship. Yes. And we went into that game and we ended up playing Beano outside and Joe went in. Right, where, I've stated before, like, Brian Concannon's movement is on a parallel to any of the top forwards out there. Like, and, I know he's had his hamstring issues and stuff, so hopefully now that's over him, and we really need a big game out of him, because if you can have 2 inside and they're on it, it's much easier. Do you know what I mean? It just spreads the load, because Wheelo, is our foreign player at the minute inside and overall, and deserves great credit for that. But we can't expect him to do it on his own. Like, so we definitely need someone in there with him that's equally going to apply the pressure. Because look, if you go back to the league game, even in Limerick, he found himself in there on his own. The ball was being lorried in, and he ended up having probably like Mike Casey, Sean Finn, top of the three players, and maybe someone or top of the three players, and then maybe another person. So you end up maybe with a 2-on-1 situation, which is a thankless situation for him. So I'm sure the lads will have addressed that that it'll be two inside to occupy more of the Limerick defenders, but hopefully whoever is with Wheelo inside can ignite on Sunday, because if they do, it'll take the pressure off him, and it'll equally take a Limerick defender out of Wheelo's way as well. So I think for everything to go well for us at the weekend, we most certainly will need that element of the game.
It's time to head south. I hope the sun is shining down in Limerick. TJ Ryan needs no introduction, former Limerick star, former Limerick manager, and of course heavily involved with St. Thomas's as well in their 3-0 quest. TJ, you're very welcome. You're looking well. I hope the sun is shining, because it's absolutely drenching us here in Galway.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me. No, unfortunately it's raining here in Limerick as well at the moment, so hopefully the sun will be shining later on in the weekend. So
have we any chance, TJ?
There's always a chance. I think the history of All-Ireland semi-finals, as Micheal will well know, is they tend to be tight. Not a lot of the games have kind of been one-sided over the last 10 years from my readings. Maybe a couple of them, but most of them have been very tight. I would be one of the ones giving Galway a lot more credit for their win against Cork than some people. Like Cork people ran about that they missed this in the first half. Like, there was still 2 points in the game on 38 minutes when Shane Kingston got the goal. Galway hurled themselves back into 5 points up, played very well, and to be honest about it, were the better side in the second half. I thought, okay, maybe they kind of clung on for the result in the finish, which games are like that. But overall, I would say Galway's approach to that game was it was a must-win game, get to a semi-final. They did that. Now the pressure is off to a degree. You're playing, obviously, the favourites for the All-Ireland. You're playing last year's champions. It's some sort of a free shot for Galway, and I do expect them. There's always a day when Galway shoot the lights out. I don't think Micheal, their forwards as a unit, would have been maybe overly happy with their performance the last day, but they still won. So there's plenty to work on there. I said Conor Whelan, you said, is flying. It's the rest of the forwards, there's more in them. And I can see, I suppose, the two questions from a Limerick side I was going to ask the Galway people is, one, will Gearóid McInerney play? And two, is there a rabbit out of a hat situation here, Micheal, in the sense that is there something that maybe we don't know that could be thrown at us? We were talking earlier.
We'll tell you that if you tell us this Keane Lynch.
You can ask me any.
You tell us first. You tell us first, and then we tell you.
And Peter Casey.
Casey.
TJ, look, we spoke about it there. Gearóid Mac playing, is huge, because obviously if he plays, it means Joseph Cooney can play further up the pitch, and
correct.
He's so important to Galway in the attack for me. So hopefully Gearóid does play, and it just gives us maybe that platform for the start of the game anyway. Do you know what I mean? Yes. That we've our 15 that we're more accustomed to, because if Gearóid doesn't play, it's no secret that Joseph will probably go back and someone else will come in. But starting off, hopefully he does.
Yeah, and to go back to the league game you mentioned, like there in the early, I know it's league, but I thought that Gearóid McInerney did a great job, let's say, on Gearóid Hegarty. They got the matchups right and seemed to get in the game management right. I know what you're saying about Conor Whelan being isolated at times, but other than that, one of the rabbits out of the hat that I spoke about earlier in the week was, I thought that particular night that Jack Hastings did a great job for Galway in that middle third. He's a different type of player, and then that would potentially maybe free up one of the other guys. I know we all want to start and we all want to play, but maybe as a guy who might come in, Jack does a job for 50-55 minutes, and then you got your ass 20 minutes. So I suppose they're the questions. I think Henry will maybe have drawn his experience. Cody would have been the master at coming up with something different maybe in a semi-final. So Henry might look at it to say, do you know what, maybe the same again. I might need to do something different. Like from Galway's point of view, like we know the standard of player that's there. We know the movement and the scores. Like, I just think that outside of the Leinster final, I think their form would have been nice. They were gradually improving all year and won their games. Just that performance in the Leinster final has left a question mark in our mind. But overall, I would be very familiar with the ability that's there, and I think they have plenty to play for. I think they have to be brave. I think that they can't really maybe sit and hold maybe something that they've done maybe a bit for the last 2 years. That might be tricky, you might say, maybe against the Limerick forward line, but I think if they're going to win, they'll have to do that. I don't know how you guys see the matchups in the full back line. Like Darren Morrissey has been playing very well. He's been marking key men and has done a great job. Like, is it likely he'll pick up Gillan and then that leaves Dahi to pick up Flanagan? I would think that's the way it will go. And to go to the Limerick side, look, Limerick are in the perfect position. Strange enough, they've only one game played in 7 weeks, Micheal. So, like, they had a 3-week break into the Munster final. Then they played the Munster final and haven't played in 4 weeks. So, the start of the game will be important to them to make sure they're on point. The word
you know
here
what,
is that
TJ, you know what you're saying, and you're right. Like, but the ideal scenario for me going into a game is that you have a 3-week window.
Correct.
Like, we're going 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So
2 weeks, yeah.
And you know yourself, it's so hard, and I think supporters have to understand this. Like, when you come off a huge game like the knockout game was against Cork, mentally for some fellas it takes them 3, 4, 5 days to come down. Do you know what I mean? And as a management team and your backroom team, you're working to get them down as quick as you can through recovery and so on, and then to get them ready to go again and then get up again. So 2 weeks is really hard. And look, you make a fair point in terms of what Henry and the team selection will be, but you know, because it's 2 weeks, you probably only have a 30-minute maybe A versus B. You're not giving the fringe lads maybe the opportunity. So I think the risk of changing it now with someone that maybe hasn't, I know you're right, and it was huge for Kilkenny down through the years, but I don't know whether it'll materialise or not. Like, and I think equally then the boys Limerick have it. They just have it off to a T, haven't they, in terms of their time into perfection?
Will they, TJ? Will they start Cian Lynch? Like, is Cian Lynch ready to roll here? Like, we're hearing Casey and himself already.
Straight in.
Yeah,
yeah.
But like, will they? I mean, Cian Lynch is too good not to have involved, isn't he?
Yeah. The truthful answer to the question, Sean, is I don't know. I'm not playing politics here. I do know that both the lads are back in the squad and they are training. It will be a big ask. I certainly, I'm not sure if you heard John Kiley's interview, but I didn't get the vibe off him that Cian Lynch was ready to start. I would say that they'll both more than likely feature in 26, and you're both most likely to see both of them at some stage. I do hear that Peter Casey is going well in training. So I just don't see it. I think he'll go with something very similar again. And then I suppose you have the question that if he did start, where does Kyle Hayes go and stuff like so. I think what Limerick will do is start very similar to the way they started in the Munster final, and they will have options, and these guys will be, whether it's 10, 15, 20, 25-minute options, that's what you're looking at. So if you ask me to call it right now and the team will be named later on, I would say that he won't be in the first 15, but he will be in the 26.
Right.
What of the psychology of, we say, the history then, TJ and Micheal, I suppose it's both for you as well, because whether you like it or not, this is Limerick going for 3 in a row, and this is the penultimate hurdle. They've never done it, and it's history. It's a bit of psychology playing into that as well. And what of the spectre, TJ, of Galway in a semi-final? Just that unknown quantity, as you say, that every now and again, everyone in the country, Kilkenny, Cork, Tip and Limerick, know that from nowhere, and we know it ourselves, at the point of least expectation, they'll come up with something.
Yeah, we're very familiar with that. I think, first of all, to be fair to this Limerick group, I think they've just done away with history to some degree. They just have they deal with each match really, really well. They kind of build it nicely. They don't get hung up on anything that's happened in the past. So I don't think talk of 3 in a row or anything like that will get to them. But I do agree with your second point. Like, in All-Ireland semi-finals, they're very difficult to win. And also, like, I think if you take over the last time, even go back to Micheal's time, there's very, very little between Limerick and Galway.
Yeah.
You know what, as well, Ollie, though, when you're involved in it, and I know when I was there, like, you know, people going, oh, you haven't done this and you haven't won it in so long and you haven't whatever. But like, my message to the lads was, look, this is my first time involved. So I've never been involved in what's gone previous, and that's the way Henry, and I'm sure that's the way the lads are treating it. Like, this is his first time playing Limerick in the championship. So, do you know what I mean?
And as well
what's
as
gone before is totally relevant, because he can't change it. All that matters now for him and the lads is Sunday, and I'm sure that's all the focus will be on.
And even like, if you look at, like, this is, I think it's still Galway's 7th All-Ireland semi-final since 2012. So there's a core of players there that are used to it. The other stat that really sticks out to me is that in the last 23 All-Ireland titles that have been won, outside of the big 3, there's only 5 titles that have gone to other than Cork, Tip or Kilkenny, right? 3 of them have gone to Limerick, 1 of them have gone to Galway, 1 of them have gone to Clare. It's ironic that those 3 teams are still alive with Kilkenny in this championship.
Kilkenny,
yeah, with Kilkenny. Like, so there's an element here of, particularly I suppose for Limerick as well, TJ, that there's a super group of players there, and you really have to make hay when the sun is shining, don't you?
Absolutely. It's the same as saying in a good club side, or say when you do have a good county team together, you do the best you can. But to go back to what you said there about stats and facts, like the 4 teams that are left, I genuinely think they're the 4 best teams in the championship. They made the provincial finals. Their scoring average, which I believe Sean and Ollie, is only 1 point between them. All 4 of them. I know Limerick have played, let's say, the 5.5 games. Galway having 7 games, Clare 6.5, and Kilkenny 6. But to look at scoring average for Limerick and Clare are both 127, Kilkenny are 224, and Galway are 126. So 1 point between 4 team scores for heading in. I know you'll say Limerick might have had the advantage of extra time, and then the flip side of it is Kilkenny and Galway would have had the advantage of, let's say, playing Laois and Westmeath. But I'm saying when you put it all together, there's very little. But small things. I think the start will be important for Galway here. I just don't think they can allow Limerick to get us a grip on this game. I think they'll need to be in the box seat. I think they'll need to start well. And the movement. And like Micheal said at the start here, I'd be very aware of the movement of, let's say, Cathal Mannion, Whelan, Cloncannon. I know what these boys are capable of. And tactically, Micheal, we have a situation where it's going to be different to the Cork game. It's a bit more physical. And the way Galway are playing with the 2 inside and Cathal Mannion playing that free role, the way Limerick play, there is a possibility here that he won't be marked as tightly as he was in some of the other games like Wexford or whatever. So we're going to look at a situation like that. So Galway's used to the ball and stuff is going to come into play early, making sure they get him on the ball out on the middle of the field, like a Tony Kelly situation. So there's loads to look forward to here, as well as the first 15s and what way the bench will play out. But yeah, like the makings of a cracking game now.
We better touch on Kilkenny.
There is another semi,
Those noisy neighbours in between the 2 of us, TJ. We better give the banner a shout. I mean, this thing, I'm sad to say it, is just set up for Cody and Kilkenny again for another ambush job, and people saying that they're the weakest of the 4 teams left. I would say there's about 140 years of history that would suggest otherwise. But if Clare play up to scratch, which is a big if, given Kilkenny's ability, it seems now mid-championship, to have turned around their tactics to strangle the life out of opposition like they did to Galway. Like, do you give Clare a big shout of getting through that match tomorrow night?
I certainly do. I would fancy him to come through. I was very impressed with him the last day against Wexford. For me, things did not go well for him at all early. They struggled. Maybe it was because of, let's say, the suspensions, or maybe the hangover, as Micheal just said there, about having a 3 week because of the Munster final, where it takes you nearly 5 or 6 days to come down, and then you literally have nearly 1 training session and you've got a tape a week. But I thought that they dealt with it exceptionally well. There was a 6-point swing during the game where Ian Galvin hit the crossbar, ball went down the field, and Wexford got a goal. And usually when that happens in games, things don't go your way. They managed to find a way. TK wasn't on his game early doors, and then he came up great with a couple of scores late on. I thought it was fierce impressive. They have a couple of decisions to make clear. Rory Hayes, don't know what the situation was there. He didn't have 2 great games. Took him off early. Do you start him? Do you not? And then the freeze. Obviously didn't go great for Tony the last day. He missed 2 of them in the second half of the Munster final. Would you give them to Peter Duggan from the start? Would you let Tony take them? Or would you let Tony kind of just concentrate on his own thing? And the last thing I heard from Anthony Daly this morning was that Aidan McCarthy was back into play, that he will definitely be in the 26 for Clare, which is a big plus. So an awful lot of pluses for Clare. The flip side is, as you said there, I'm sure Kilkenny people and Cody will be kind of saying, just Clare between ourselves and another All-Ireland final. They'll be happy with that. A couple of question marks about them would be around their midfield as to who they play, because there's been a lot of chopping and changing. And I think it was Anthony Daly gave me the stat this morning that Cody has used 18 players between number 8 and number 15 in this year's championship. That's some amount of players.
And I think, TJ, I think the midfield for the last 2 or 3 years, I don't know, has he ever played the same 2? So there's a state of flux there all the time. Micheal, your thoughts?
I agree with everything that TJ said. I'd say, for me, I've just seen Clare a bit over the last few years, different games, and I've just thought, they're getting stronger. Their squad depth and quality is just getting stronger every year. And for me, I think they'll shade it. I think even they'll learn from the last 2 weeks from the Munster final to the 2 weeks into the semi. But if you go back for me to the Leinster final, the game was very start-stop. Maybe we can attribute that to James Owens. I think a huge factor the weekend for them is Fergal Horgan as reffing it, and like he's probably for me the top ref. He will let it flow, and for that reason, I think that will help Kilkenny a lot, or help Clare a lot. Do you know what I mean? That they get into the flow of it, and I just think where they didn't win the Munster, they're coming with a lot of confidence. They're coming with great form, and for me, I think they'll probably be 3-1. I'm sure on supporters as well. So that place will be rocking for them tomorrow. And look, we've seen it firsthand ourselves in 18 when they came. Like they'll explode there. So I expect a clear win. Yeah.
Again, I'm harping on about the psychology, but can you understand what I'm saying, Sean Welch, when I say if Clare beat Kilkenny tomorrow evening, the mood between the end of that happening and Galway Limerick will be absolutely transformed around the country, because as you say, you're looking at one of those rare guaranteed opportunities where it's not Kilkenny or Cork or Tip.
From a Limerick point of view, you could have a third Limerick-Clare meeting. You could have said the rivalry between Limerick and Clare, the rivalry that would be, we'll say, between Galway and Clare, it would take a life of its own.
Correct.
Entirely. So you're right, yeah. But I mean, look, the thing is, I talked to a Kilkenny guy this week, and he talked about it's their third All-Ireland semi-final. They're in transition, like they've won 3 Leinster titles in a row. They're in their third All-Ireland semi-final. Yeah. He's expecting something to come, and we're going, God, we take those transition days anytime.
If they could get another 30 years of transitioning, it'd be great, you know.
To go back to what Ali said there as well, Ali, what you said about nobody probably manages that 4-week gap than Cody. He's brilliant at that. They seem to get their 15 and 15s really, really right. And actually, one of the things that came up in our discussion this morning from Brian Hogan was, believe it or not, is one of the fellas who hasn't featured all year, who's supposed to be going really well for Kilkenny, is a certain Richie Hogan.
Richie Hogan, yeah. Same thing he told me, same thing I was told during the week, and supposedly flying, has played a few club games, etc.
Yeah.
Imagine springing him like.
Yeah, so there you go. So you could be right, Ali, about your psychology in Kilkenny.
Well, look, isn't it an amazing weekend to look forward to? Offaly and Tip in a minor final, we're hearing sold out. 27,000 going to a minor final on its own bat. Yeah. Extraordinary stuff.
It is.
We'll be talking football next week because we'll be on the eve of a Galway Mayo minor football final
in
Roscommon. In Roscommon. This GA thing is changing, lads, by the week. It's crazy stuff. But look, come Sunday evening, we'll know the All-Ireland finalists, and we'll do it all again next week. But for now, Micheal and TJ, thanks so much for joining us. And for myself and Sean, all we can do is wish Galway the very best of luck at the weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.